When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was in a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29, and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide, and she had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet. But she seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a little bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I look nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night she had been saying I look like him, and now it's obvious to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together, really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls all night. I wondered what the hell she could possibly be doing. Occasionally she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything, and she would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, "Hello, Beth." And then there would be this long, awkward pause, and she would give out her creepy, high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom, and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. One night I was watching Gladiator, and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie. I was annoyed. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I just said sure, and then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, she was so riled up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower the volume. Amidst all of her screaming, one thing she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled that she will slit his throat. That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening, and she started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the house with her, and what was worse was that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act as a little barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning, when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies, and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on. To my shock, I received 40-plus text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged from everything between asking how I was and saying she hated me so much. It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and slit my throat? It freaks me out. I was living in Hawaii and had to move to LA for work. I didn't know anyone, was fairly broke, and my job wasn't going to help with moving expenses. So I resorted to scouring Craigslist for a room for rent. After literally hundreds of scams or weirdos, I finally found this amazing girl. She was funny, we had similar interests, and she even worked in the same field as me. She didn't yet have a place, but she and another girl were looking at several houses that required a third roommate, and they were totally fine with doing all the work, seeing as how I was an ocean away. She called or Skyped with me about once a week and sent me pictures of each house they looked at. All in all, she was incredible. Fast forward 3 months, they found a huge and gorgeous house. Everything was settled, and the 2 girls, Yvonne and Juliana, were moved in. Yvonne, the original girl from Craigslist, picked me and all my stuff up at the airport. On the ride home, she starts telling me horror stories about her past roommates. Every single one had messed her over in some horrendous way, and she was terrified of being close to people after that. She said she wanted us to be the people who turned that around for her, that she wanted us to be a little family. Yvonne then drove us not to the house, but to a nearby Starbucks where she chain-smoked. She then told me about her stepdad who was in AA and how she'd briefly been attending meetings after a short bout with painkiller addiction. Then she had decided she wasn't a drug addict and didn't need it. She also admits that she's only known the other roommate for a month and a half. I'm seeing red flags all over the place. Why would an LA native need to find strangers to live with her on Craigslist? Why was she oversharing about drugs and family? Why had she never had a positive roommate experience? I pushed it all aside, giving this girl the benefit of the doubt. A few weeks go by in the house, and all is well. I forget she ever seemed off, and we start becoming close. Then she takes me on a tour of LA for a day and proceeds to tell me her entire disturbing life story. When I say we had gotten close, by no means were we close enough to make this appropriate. She tells me about her stepfather who molested her. She got sent to a mental hospital when she told on him because he's a doctor and said she was criminally insane. She got abused by a lesbian at the hospital and beaten by the guards and shortly attempted to overdose. I learned about her mother's severe narcotic addiction, her ex-fiancé having a psychotic break and trying to kill her. It didn't stop there. Yvonne told me about her struggles with a chronic kidney illness that required many surgeries and her recent long-term boyfriend disappearing under mysterious circumstances. The horrific stories just went on and on and on. It sounded like something from a movie, and a part of me questioned if it could all possibly be true, but again I give her the benefit of the doubt. Again, things go fine for a while, and my doubts about her subside. Then, my food starts disappearing. I ask both girls about it privately, and Yvonne claims that the other girl, Juliana, had confessed to her that she was a compulsive overeater. Naturally, Juliana claims to be innocent. I side with Yvonne, and we start mildly bullying Juliana to try to get her to admit to stealing the food. Then, dishes start piling up in the sink, and nobody is washing them except me. I ask both girls, and again Yvonne swears on her life that it's Jules. Finally, Jules has had enough. It turns out she's been eating out every meal. We all had extremely different schedules. Yvonne lied to my face about the dishes and the food. When confronted, Yvonne starts crying and saying how I could accuse her. She keeps on weeping and repeating that she's a good person, and we end up apologizing to her in the end. Finally, the tension builds between the 2 girls due to many repeats of this situation. One night when I'm at work, they start fighting. Yvonne calls me saying Juliana hit her and she's afraid for her life. I call Jules and tell her to find a new place to live. Juliana goes to stay with friends and within a week moves out. Now things get really weird. Ivan moves out of the master bedroom and starts sleeping in the living room every night. After I repeatedly request that she return to living in her bedroom, she tearfully confesses that she's been on high-dose opiates this whole time and is trying to wean herself off. It makes her too weak to walk downstairs to her room. Feeling sorry for her, I end up babysitting her for weeks while she withdraws. It was both terrifying and disgusting, but I wanted to help her out. During this time, I see her naked and realize that she has no scars from her supposedly repeated surgeries. Beyond that, she confides in me that she hasn't been working at all this entire time, but going out to score drugs and get high every day, and now she's flat broke. She apologizes for lying, saying over and over that she's a sick addict and just needs help. I get her into AA and NA as soon as she's able to walk, driving her daily to meetings and holding her hand the whole time. My longtime boyfriend and her oldest friend move in with us a short while later to help with bills. That's when it all goes from bad to unbearable. Ivan goes to visit her mum one night and disappears for a week, returning very clearly high and claiming to be sober. She then starts going on many trips to visit friends in other states and is rarely home. When she is home, she babbles endlessly about how great sobriety is and how she's finally healing while clearly nodding out on opiates. I end up finding something suspicious on her computer. She admits to me that she's been working as a call girl and bringing customers to the house. I tell her she has to stop, and she claims she already has. Around this time, she becomes very, very physically ill. Finally, I get a phone call from her after another absence. She's hysterical. She's, get this, 6 months pregnant. She didn't know because she was so high. The baby was severely malformed and there was no way of carrying to term. I comforted her, thinking that this trauma outweighed all the weird behaviors she exhibited. She had the procedure and afterwards disappeared for almost a month. I thought at one point that she was dead until she texted me, asking if her cat was okay. When she returned, she proceeded to start eating all of our food, using all of our toiletries, sleeping on the couch and smoking inside the house, which was not okay with us at all. She was also very clearly on drugs. At first, we tried to be nice about it, but she lied and lied, even going so far as to say her room was haunted and the ghost made her sleep upstairs. Finally, my boyfriend snaps and yells at her. She calls the cops and claims he assaulted her. They didn't believe her, but the other roommate did. Then one night when I'm at work, she uses pity and sweet-talking to convince my BF that we should all be friends again. I told him it was a lie, and he didn't believe me. When I get home from work that same night, my room is trashed. I asked if he did it, and of course he didn't. She'd been in there looking for cash or drugs, which I don't do. When I asked her about it, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, it was the ghost. After that, she started sending me insane emails, claiming that I had been her best friend and had betrayed her, accusing her of heinous crimes, and even convincing her she was a drug addict as a form of sick psychological torture. The emails get increasingly intense, becoming 10 to 20-page letters about how she didn't feel safe in her own home and how I was the embodiment of pure evil. She said that my only purpose in life was to torment her. In these emails, she claimed that she used drugs on rare occasions and that I had made up everything about her problem, that I had been verbally abusive about her abortion, and that we had repeatedly physically assaulted her. We were genuinely afraid for our safety, especially after the police showed up one day and took her in for a mysterious psychiatric hold. We never found out why she was carried out of the house, barefoot and handcuffed, by 4 LAPD officers. After that, we just tried to avoid her, but she got the other roommate involved. She even went too far as to claim she had pneumonia from the stress of living with us and our constant abuse. The emails continued to escalate. At one point, she said that I had been a sister to her until the evil spirit in me had forced me to abuse her. This was when I realized that her definition of abuse was a bit skewed, and all her stories about her childhood, exes, old roommates, and even Juliana had been complete fabrications. Of course, she didn't have scars from the surgeries. Everything she said was a lie to garner sympathy so she could take advantage of people. Now I realized, of course, that she was completely mad. We found a new house, and the night before moving out, I hacked into her email. I come to find out she had been telling our landlord that we were heinous criminals, telling her parents that she had been fired from a job because of me and needed money. There were all kinds of lies. Also, we come to find out that the guy who got her pregnant didn't mysteriously disappear. He ran away because they slept together once, and she started stalking him. Obviously, everything she had ever said was a creepy lie. After moving out, the harassing emails and texts continued to the point that I had to have her blocked on both and seriously considered getting a restraining order. This was many years ago. Last month, we found out that this girl who claimed to have never been a drug addict, and that I made all of it up, had died of an OD. She was evil. This wasn't a situation where nobody tried to help a sick person. Everyone around her tried to help her, and she manipulated and used them. I don't feel sad that she's gone. In fact, I still want to punch her in the face. This happened about 10 years ago now. I was a college student, and I was basically forced to move out on my own, which I didn't mind. But that meant finding a new roommate, which can be a daunting and scary experience. I've had a few weird encounters, but I think this one takes the cake. I posted on Craigslist looking for a bedroom in a shared house or apartment for $300 or less, and on my ad, I mentioned, "Please no phone calls, only texts or email." I find being on the phone with someone, I haven't had a chance to size up a really uncomfortable situation. I'm just awkward, I guess. Anyway, I got a call from a dude who clearly didn't read the no calls part. This type of phone call was exactly the reason I don't like to talk to strangers on the phone. At first, he was just pleasant and normal. He told me he had a room available and relevant information like that. We started to talk about when and where we'd meet, and he started going on tangents about random stuff. I'm a combination of too interested in deep conversation and too awkward to end the call when it started to get weird, so this call went on for 2 hours. We even talked about the meaning of life and all kinds of weird stuff. Honestly, this should have been the red flag, and I shouldn't have met him. Of course, I also should have grown a pair and told him I needed to leave. So, he wants me to meet him at his place and show me the room. I've since learned that you should really insist on meeting in public first. I got to his neighborhood, and it was run down on a level that made the ghetto I grew up in look nice. There were saggy front porches, hot cracked concrete, sad-looking people with old beat-up Lincolns. You get the picture. His house blended right in. The yard was seriously overgrown, and the front door didn't work. So I went around the back, and just looking at the guy standing in the doorway and seeing the kitchen behind him was enough to make me realize I really just wanted to leave. There's no way in hell I'd like to live there. The guy in the doorway was a man with a sort of clown-style afro. He was leaning on a cane on his right side, his eyes looked crazy, and the house smelled musty from 10 feet away. Again, I'm a coward, so instead of trusting my gut, I go inside. I was thinking, it's okay, it will be over in 20 minutes, and I can get the hell out. I don't know what made me think this. That's the man who had a 2-hour conversation with me on the phone about life and philosophy. He took me up a flight of creaky steps into a small bedroom with no door and a mattress on the floor. I thought no way in hell would I live with a 40-something man and no door on my bedroom. I'm female and 19 at the time, by the way. Anyways, it was a moot point because my mind was made up before I even saw the room. I wouldn't have lived there for free, let alone for $200 a month. Things got weird. He tried to hold me hostage with conversation again. I think he was lonely. He talked about how some of his family were millionaires. He might have been delusional, and the whole story seemed made up. Then, he told me about an 18-year-old girl that has also checked out the room and tried to have sex with him, and told me about how his mum hated white people. He was black, I was white, and it sounded like he sympathized with her. Obviously, that was super uncomfortable. Eventually, I was able to find a break in the conversation and plucked up the courage to make up an excuse to leave. I was never so happy to leave a place in my life. I don't know that he necessarily intended harm or anything, but he really gave me the creeps. Please drop a like and subscribe to Eerie Echoes for more horror stories. As always, thank you for watching.